Hi, it's Clark here. This is the Agile Bottleneck Rules BETA wrap-up session, and it's a live recording. It lasted about 2 hours, and the purpose of this is to take all the stuff you've seen in the course so far about bottlenecks, how to generically manage them in all sorts of situations, and then how to apply that to make U-shaped teams. And this session is talking about two things. One is how to transition from your team's current shape with respect to where your bottleneck is, to make sure it is a U-shaped team. And the U-shaped team, of course, has the developers as the bottleneck. So the first part is to how to transition from how you are to get it to U-shape. The second part is about how to keep it there, how to protect your U-shape and how to grow it once you've got it there. The U-shaped team is really fragile in the real world. People don't like that you have some people who aren't 100% busy all the time. And things change. People leave, people come in, stuff happens. And the U-shaped team can be very, very fragile if you're not careful. Okay, so this session shows you how to think about those two things, how to get it to U-shape and how to keep it there. Now, this was a live session, so compared to the stuff you've seen so far, which was recorded and edited, which is much more like writing a book, this conversation, 2 hours, it'll wander around a bit. I'll repeat quite a lot of stuff over and over, but I think you'll find it very, very useful. The most important thing I'd like you to take away from this is that the U-shaped teams go much faster, but most people don't get why they are so important. So I'm sure that if you work through this, look at it, you'll have a much better understanding of how to cause the change that you're looking for. So thank you very much for joining the beta. If you have any comments or anything, just send me an email. Please, I'd love to hear from you. Clarke, CLARKE, at toc.guide. So thank you very much. Enjoy. Oh, but maybe you might want to watch this on 1.5 times speed, live thing and all that. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And nearly there. Right, and I'll get... So just so you know, I have the Kanban board up here on my screen. So I'll use my computer to do that, and I'll use my iPad to have a look down here. So on the Kanban board, so it says start here. And actually just, I love Miro. So just if you haven't noticed this on Miro, there's a little arrow on the start here Kanban thing, which I've added. And if you tap on that, it should bring your, that yellow box up to full size. Okay, so let me just make sure I can see everything here. Yeah, and I get that back. Right, so the first thing that you're going to do is this is all really wonderful stuff in theory. In practice, it can be kind of tricky to find your bottleneck. It's much easier that if you go to a shop, say, and you find big queues of people waiting in front of the checkout, you go, okay, I see. Yeah, it's much easier in traffic system to see queues lined up in front of a roundabout or a bit where traffic merges into a tunnel, and the queues usually give you a really good hint that there's a bottleneck just afterwards. But when you're working in software, it's so easy to have people working on too much stuff at once. It can get really blurry. So this is one of the reasons why I'm finding it hard to describe this, how to do this. But what I've found is it doesn't actually matter all that much to start with where the actual bottleneck is. But that's not true. It does. But the very first thing that you actually want to do is actually just get your head around what your team looks like. So on the screen here, that's the first step. When you're looking for a bottleneck, you want resources. when you draw something out like this here, they might look like they're sequential steps because this different resources tend to focus on one of those steps. But this is just the first step. Just list out the resources. So I have put in here customer. So, and by that, generally I'm referring to an internal customer, and it has that role has, it could be product owner, could be product manager, could be called internal customer, it could be a sponsor, it could be a bunch of different people. But these are the people who supply the team with the prioritization of what they want to work on, and the details of what they want to work on. Now, the arrows are on here, of course. There are loops, and there will be conversations that go backwards and forwards between any of these roles in theory, but the main flow is from left to right. Now, I put customer and supplier on there for a really good reason. Is because the customer actually tends to do two things. They are your customer, and that they're the person that, if you take that analogy for a business, that is paying for your work. They are the people that's placing the orders. You know, I'll have one of these and 6 of these, but they're also the person that's required, or the people who are providing the raw materials for your, please don't cringe when I say software factory, just an analogy, that they're supplying the inputs to you. So they're also a supplier at the same time. Most businesses, if it's a retail shop, the customers will be buying stuff, and completely different set of people will be supplying the raw materials that they sell, you know, the inventory. So it gets a little bit confusing here because the customer is actually the supplier as well. And it probably doesn't matter much, but you may remember there was a story at the beginning of the course with Elon Musk and his factory. His factory didn't have enough batteries coming in, so the whole factory's capacity and therefore their sales was limited by the battery supply, which came from I think it was Toshiba. It's been a while since I've seen it. It could have been a different. So batteries coming in from a supplier, and the whole system ran at the speed of the supplier. And so it's worth thinking here that when we're actually developing our stuff, most people, if you ask them to draw a diagram of their resources, they don't think of their customers as a resource, and they don't put them on the diagram. So if you don't do that, what you find is that I would guess 70–80% of agile teams, the customer/supplier is actually the bottleneck. But we tend to go, oh, that's not IT, and we leave that outside the circle. Okay. Now, there's some question marks there on this. Actually, no, I'll just skip to the end. It's also important to put the users on. I've seen this a few times where teams convert to Agile, they get really good at it, and then they start pushing out so much stuff. It's amazing, but their customers can't keep up. Their users, rather, can't keep up. And the rate of change actually overwhelms them. And it's kind of like they just give up sometimes. A friend of mine who's she's actually just retired as the professor of theory of constraints at one of the universities here in Wellington, in New Zealand, in Wellington. She kept complaining to me. She says, "Oh, we use this software that we use for marking people," and then they sent out this email to everyone, and we paid them quite a lot of money, and they told us how wonderful it was they're going agile, and we loved it, but they keep changing things, and we can't keep up. And it's really confusing, and it confuses the students because you will give them instructions to do this, and then a few weeks later, suddenly it's changed to that. So again, just making sure that we have the customers at the front and the users at the end, because if we speed up any one of these and we don't take into account the whole system, we end up actually often making things worse. So we make them better, but we make them worse at the same time. Right. Okay, so we've got these lovely ones here. So there's no capacity thing here. It's just an indication of flow. There's a few other roles and resources that aren't necessarily obvious when we do this stuff. So if I come pick on this one,
So when you've raced along, done wonderful agile stuff, you've got your processes flowing really nicely and smoothly, and you're feeling really proud of things, and you've actually got yourself a U-shaped team. You go, this is really good. Then there is a bottleneck then. And what it can often be is the malleability or the changeability or the quality and of your code base. So if you've got all your people resources sorted out, suddenly the thing that's actually slowing you down could be, oh my God, like in my first job where I was 22 and I was working on 25-year-old COBOL. And so it didn't matter how fast you were or clever you were kind of limited by the code base. You could also be, once you've got up and running, limited, hang on, sorry, I'll just move that back there a little bit, by your automated tests. So this is when you've got things running well and you go, how do we go faster? Well, we could definitely add more code. We could good quality stuff from all of the people working on it, put it in. But honestly, if we do that, our automated tests, they're going to take 2 years to run overnight, to be a bit silly about it. So there are other things here that aren't just the people, right? There could be lots of other things there. I'm going to put one in here. It's going to seem really daft. I have seen places, in fact, Matt and Dwayne, you know, Standard Life, or whatever it's called now that it's changed and lost its vowels. I can't pronounce Aberdeen, something like that. When I worked there many years ago, they bought a whole lot of smaller desks, and they gave everyone smaller desks, and so they could squeeze more people in. It was really, really good. But suddenly the meeting rooms couldn't cope. So if you wanted to work with people, and this was 20 years ago before collaboration was popular, but if you wanted to work with people and talk through stuff, suddenly you didn't have enough meeting rooms. And it was the first time I realized that something as simple as a meeting room could actually limit the ability to work with people collaboratively. And it's a thing that gets worse and worse and worse. And I'm sure you know that when meeting rooms become scarce, people start booking them and they start putting fake bookings in, and all sorts of game playing goes on, and it slows everything down, but everyone looks really, really busy when you look at their diary. Okay, so there's just a few other things there, and it's worth, when you're plotting this stuff out, to focus on those ones in the middle row, but often there are other things at play, so I just don't want you to think it's only the people in the middle there. Right, so if you roll up a bit, this role here is often a bottleneck. So this is quite surprising, because people just don't think about it. And you look and you look at the tech leads and you go, wow, they're so busy. They're so busy and they've got so many people. Look at them. They're real, they're very heroic, how much work they're doing. But look at all the defects. Look at the quality of the code that's actually coming out. It's really slowing down those developers. And what's happening is that you've got development teams working along, and the developers are slugging away, but they're not getting the coaching and guidance and help from the more experienced technical leads. So they're making poorer quality code. But again, they look busy, which is good. They look busy. Everyone feels good. They're churning out stuff. But what's happening is actually, I won't try and draw on Miro until I need to. There's a feedback loop where there's either slower, poorer quality code that's harder to work on, so it slows everyone down. So the code base is effectively starting to slow everyone down, or there's a whole lot of rework, so that work gets found here with problems, gets fed back to somewhere back here or here, and starts feeding in and taking up capacity to fix stuff that should have been got right to start with. So tech leader can be a bottleneck, and that's really surprisingly common because in that kind of job, the attitude is often, I'll just let them suck it up, and then we'll just load more and more onto them. Okay, so in this one here, whatever name you have for this particular role, the Scrum Master. You have a Scrum Master, they go, oh, look at Matt over there, he's doing a great job as a Scrum Master. And look at him, he's sitting there sometimes, and he looks like he's just thinking, oh my goodness, we'll give him another team. So suddenly Matt now has got really, really busy, but both teams are missing out on the coordination and facilitation and the team gelling and all of those good things that keep a team running along really well. But suddenly everyone's become really, really busy. Again, they all look really, really busy, but for a little bit more Scrum Mastering capacity, which is sadly often seen as an overhead, they could actually go faster. So that's also common. And I'm sure there are other roles, but the one, whether or not you have project managers in here, sometimes the same happens with project managers or managers. And what you're finding there is that these are often decisions that aren't day-to-day decisions, but we really need another tester. It's really obvious. We've done everything here. We need a tester. So how are we going to get a tester? We go to the project manager and they say, look, have you got budget for another tester? Because honestly, it's where the bottleneck is. We've done everything we can. We now need to spend some money, get another tester. And the project manager says, yes, I understand that. I'll get to that next week. But then they're so busy that they don't get to it. And so the team actually, in the short term, is very slow because they're waiting for this higher level bottleneck to find time to actually get the resource. I have seen in some companies where the HR department effectively becomes the bottleneck because you're trying to do all these changes, you need people, and you're slowed down because the HR department either has a lot of rules or they don't have enough capacity. Okay, so there's lots of different things here, but we're going to focus on this middle row here for this. But just be wary that once you get that stuff in your head, you'll often find that it's the tech lead or the customer that is your bottleneck. And you'll also find that once you get things running, these two here, once you've got a smoothly running system, these two here become your bottleneck. Right. Okay, now let me check where I am here. Yep, okay, so now what I'm supposed to do here is I'm going to get this guy and I'm going to duplicate this. Okay, so if you guys come to the right now, right, so now we have a U-shaped team there in front of us, except it's not U-shaped at the moment because we didn't have capacity on before. So the big insight that Goldratt came up with is that capacity matters, but everyone pretends it acts as if you've got infinite capacity. Kind of, but in practice, they don't really. They know about capacity. They always want to know how many testers should we have relative to how many developers and stuff like that. So let me just really quickly draw how a U-shaped team might look. I draw, I say move around things. So what we're saying here is just so it's really clear, customers and analysts, they have plenty of capacity to be fast so that when they feed stuff and they pop it in the fuel tank here, the fuel tank, whatever you call that, your backlog. Hang on, I'm having trouble moving this here. So that goes from there. And then the developers pull. Apologies, my clicking is not working very well. Yeah, so that wasn't very elegant. So Yeah, and we have a fuel tank between them there. So what we're saying is, in order to actually have time to fill that fuel tank, my parents live on a hill, and they actually have they don't have a local fuel supply, but they have a water tank sitting in front of them. So if there's enough rain and it fills up, they don't run out of water. So you have to have more rain than demand, and we just fill it up with a fuel tank. So I probably don't need to belabor that. So we've got this nice, friendly looking, sort of like a smiley faced shape. Now, this here is also a potential shape for a U-shaped team. Okay, it's not literally U all the way up. What it's really saying, the name, is that the developers have less relative capacity than everyone else. Or to put that in a nicer way, everyone else has more capacity than the developers. Okay, so that's a potential U-shaped team there. Now, I'm going to skip ahead to the end result now. And so I need to move that around because that's just really going to annoy me otherwise. Hang on. What I'm going to do, so I'm just going to connect that up and get rid of the fuel tank because it'll just pester me. Okay, so I'm going to skip to the end now and just imagine that you've got a U shape. So you've gone off and you've actually looked at your team. This could be a team of 4 people. It could be a team of 50 people. It could be 150 people. But you're looking at it and you go, oh, okay, I've looked at this. I've wandered around and clearly the developers of the people upstream have got plenty of time to feed the developers. So that's good. Okay. And look, I said, are you developers ever waiting on feedback from testers or automated testing or anything like that? Do you get testing feedback quickly? And they'll go, yes, we do. And you go, okay, that's good. So it sounds like you've got a U shape. So you've got this U-shaped team. Do you think developers are your bottleneck? And then you run through other possibilities and you look around and you go, no, actually, look, this is actually dead right. This is great. So now think of that guy I met in the coffee shop after the conference. What you really, really, really want to do then, once you've got that, is not destroy your U-shape. You want to protect it. So on my Kanban thing, I have a thing there that at the top says, if the bottleneck equals dev, then protect and grow it. Okay, so you know about the focus formula, the find, optimize, the 3 C's, etc., right? You know probably, I imagine, about Goldratt's identify, exploit, subordinate, elevate, and then repeat. You know about those, but once you've got this thing here, you don't want the bottleneck to move. You really don't, and unless there's some circumstance where, say, some emergency is coming up and you want everyone to sit there and just be braced and ready for it to dive into action, you don't want the U-shape to change. So you need to protect it, and it's very, very, very fragile. So what will often happen is that people come up. Well, the classic one is you've got it running well, and then your customer, your sponsor, your lead customer, your product manager, call them whatever you want to, your master product owner, they get a promotion. Someone else comes in from outside. They come in and they go, all right, I've got a new job here. I have to demonstrate value. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to change this. So they will change things. And then they'll go, or they'll come in and they've been actually, one leaves and someone else comes in, but they've from their current organization, and they now have 2 jobs. And so suddenly what happens is that this drops away. The one that's got me a few times, and it's not been my fault, was maternity leave. Where, say, someone is the right shape, and then suddenly someone goes off on maternity leave, and people go, oh, look, the team's humming along. And I remember the first time I noticed it was with a group of analysts, and they had just the right amount. Everything was flowing perfectly. And then someone leaves, and everyone just, you guys just suck it up. I think, you look like you've got time to suck it up. So they did, but the whole team slowed down. The whole team actually, the whole team got really, really busy, but they slowed down because they didn't actually have the time to make sure that the stuff that was being fed into the developers was good quality. These sort of things can happen to any role here. So that's the first thing you've got to do. And I'm going to put this up here. 1, protect it. So when you use the focus formula or the 5 focusing steps, or even just good old-fashioned common sense, what you want to do is use the words in those 2 things, the focus formula and the 5 focusing steps, to think about how do I keep the bottleneck there by making sure that I stack capacity around it. And it's really just as simple as this. Just by analogy, if you're going to build a new subdivision with a whole lot of houses around, you probably want to make sure that if there's 1,000 new kids coming into an area, you build new classrooms and hire new teachers or a new school. And that's all it is. If you're going to make sure it's here, just make sure you protect it. Now, when you grow, this is the second one. So 2 is grow carefully. So this is the case where you've got your U shape and the team is humming along and you keep improving, which is, obviously a really, really good thing. And you keep improving. And then what normally happens if you don't think about this is the bottleneck will move. Suddenly the developers, you focus a lot of attention on getting good development practices. Maybe you go through and you tidy up the code and you put a bit of effort into it and you get, somehow you just get faster. But then all of a sudden, this goes up here and you can't test, you can't keep up. And that is not good, because what will happen is that people will start moaning and they'll start complaining. It'll kind of be largely invisible though. There'll be a bit more, not enough testers, the testers are too slow, They might even break further apart because they get grumpy with each other, which will make things worse. But so you just need to make sure, actually, and the other thing that will happen is that the developers will start rushing on and not waiting for testing, or the testers will start lowering their quality so that they can keep up. They'll cut corners. So if this moves up, you want to make sure that this moves up as well. And if need be, this one moves up. And this one moves up. So you've got to think of the whole thing. So think of a fleet of Navy ships crossing the Atlantic with an aircraft carrier at the middle. That's your development. You've got all these other ships that are going around beside them. They all have to be faster than the aircraft carrier in the middle. And if you suddenly get the aircraft carrier able to go faster, the surrounding ships need to go faster as well. So that I hope that's really obvious, but it's not really obvious for most people when you first learn about bottlenecks, because the stuff that you read is you find the bottleneck, you manage it, and suddenly the factory's not closed down. Longer term, you want to strategically think about, how do I get the bottleneck where I want it, and then how do I keep it there? Okay, right. Now, if the bottleneck isn't development, then you just want to use the focus formula to figure out how you can move it there. And the first thing that you want to do is effectively, I'm just going to draw a line here. You want to put in somewhere around here, and I'll make it just big and thick. This is not a very good representation of it, but the first thing you want to do when you realize that, developers aren't our bottleneck, so we're not U-shaped, is you want to limit WIP. You just want to do good agile stuff and just limit WIP. And often that's hard, but limiting WIP, and I call this a throttle neck. You've got your bottleneck in the middle and the deliberate place of development. You want something upstream. It's kind of acting like a tap or a throttle for the fuel in an engine. So you turn it on and off. You use something upstream, and you should already have something that does this, where you're pulling work into the team at the right speed, rather than just pushing it in and seeing what happens at the end. So you have to deliberately put that in, and it's normally, depending on your arrangement of people, it's usually a combination of your customer, and say your tech leads and your scrum master, or that could be one sort of at a level just outside of the team, just making sure that they all agree that they're not going to force stuff on. They're not going to try and stuff too much sausage meat into the machine. And that makes it far easier for the team to pull stuff in if they're not under pressure to just keep pulling stuff in and churning it out. And so that's the very, very first step that you do. You just make sure that you choke the work in. You already know how to do this, but it just needs to be explicit, because it's one of those things that often when people convert to Agile, they find that the customer and the IT team, even though they're on the same side and that they're working in the same business, they feel like they're in a war, playing on different sides against each other, and then negotiating with each other. So really the first step is to just try and get that a little bit better so that you can slow things down. And then what will happen once you do that is, if you don't already know where your bottleneck is, it'll suddenly become really obvious. You just, if things are rushing and there's too much stuff going on, you can't see. But if you slow them down a little bit, you suddenly go, oh, okay, it's obvious. Testers are a bottleneck. Or if that customer won't come to the meetings to talk about throttlenecks and keep saying, no, rise of the whip, just keep working harder, then you know, okay, our bottleneck is actually probably the customer. But just slow this down. So if you imagine a hospital, this is how they put TOC into hospitals. Imagine that you don't do this on the emergency ward, but you just look and you go, wow, it's a huge hospital. We can see we've got all sorts of data, but we don't know where the bottleneck is. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stop letting people into the system. And then just watch, just for a short time, as patients go through and then find out where they get blocked. So like you put them through and suddenly you go, well, it's not surgery at all. Oh, look, it's the exiting procedure where people leave. There's not enough staff doing the bit where they go off and they get the tablets that they give people. So choking the whip is a really good way of just clearing stuff out and giving you far more visibility. And then once you've done that, that's when you flip into focus mode. So you remember in the course earlier, there was a barbecue. There was a little barbecue, and I realized that we were going to have people around just after Christmas, which is summertime here, and we were going to have a barbecue, and our little barbecue, which I bought from Scotland, wasn't going to cope with a Kiwi barbecue. And so I was like, oh no, I have to go and buy a $1,500 super duper Weber barbecue just to cope for this one thing. How cool is that? And my wife said, are you sure? And I really wanted a new barbecue. And instead I went on Twitter and said, hey, I've got a problem. Got any suggestions? And people just came up with these really sensible suggestions about how, if you found the bottleneck, it's the barbecue. What could you do differently? And people just instinctively come up with a whole bunch of different ideas. And you go, oh, okay, that's obvious. Now, when you're going to look at a real world situation, you could tell people about bottlenecks and focus, and you could run them through right now. How would we optimize? How would we curate? How would we coordinate? How would we do this? I've found that actually in the real world, what you want to do is help people realize where the bottleneck is, and then just ask them for suggestions. So find it, and then just give a bunch of suggestions. And what will happen is people go straight into problem solving mode. They understand the bottlenecks there. They understand that everyone else now has to slow down. So they're going to have spare capacity. And then they go, okay, what could we do to that? And they'll just chat around, and it becomes a problem solving thing. And because we're working with natural born problem solvers, you get a whole bunch of stuff come out. Now, I don't have a slide here to show you, but I'm just going to write it just down here, just so you can see it. FBI. And now I'm going to change the font here so it's big. So I want you to think, instead of having the focus formula as a step that you go through, just think of it as something that you can use to prompt different areas you do. So I like to start with get people understanding what a bottleneck is, figure out where you think it is, which is find or frame, and then brainstorm a bunch of good ideas. Okay, but this isn't like your typical brainstorming where it's just crazy stuff. You're actually focused on the idea of there is a bottleneck. And then once you've done that, implement iteratively and incrementally. Okay, so let me bring that back in here so you can see the whole lot. So FBI, frame the problem. We've found the bottleneck. Right, there it is. Right, now, guys, get together. Suggestions. Lay them out. Just go crazy. More. Good work. Good work. More. Now, let's implement them iteratively and incrementally. And we know, because of who we are, that if we try and implement all of them, we'll have a disaster. We'll know that some of the ideas are a bit dopey, but maybe 20% of some of each idea is actually really good. But even if we took the 80-20 version and got the little bits of each of them, there'd be too many to start with. It's like we've got a menu on our wall in one of those Chinese takeaways where you've got zillions of things you can choose from. So you're just going to order a starter. I'll have a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and a little bit of that. So you take them and then you implement them iteratively and incrementally. You try a little bit, see if it helps. Maybe the next day you realize it does help. Maybe the next day you realize actually that, hey, look, we've got everything that we wanted from a few little changes. So it's just really an incremental way of doing this. Part of the brainstorming that's really helpful is that if you ask people for their instinctive ideas, then go through and match them up with the focus formula steps. Oh yeah, okay, that one there, that would be a bit of coordination, yeah, and some clever curation. Okay, that's good. And then when you kind of bounce between the instinctive brainstorming and the trying to match some of this, you'll find that other ideas come up. They'll go, oh, okay, that's curation. Right. Oh, that's really clever. We could do this. Coordination. Oh, okay, right. What other coordination things have we got? And so you'll come up with a bunch of really clever little ideas from that. And if you do it in this way, you can facilitate the bottleneck management as a team exercise, but make sure that when you do it, you have the whole team, not just the developers, not just the people inside the Scrum team, but you have enough people from all around so that they do represent all of the different resource types. Right, okay, so that's FBI, and that's a really, really handy agile way of thinking about managing bottlenecks and combining it with the instinctive way of problem solving, but sort of capturing it using the focus formula. Right, now I am going to go back up here. And I'm going to come to this one. And I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move to the right. Okay, now I'm going to ask you all. In fact, I'm going to pop down here first. I'm going to give you a hint that if you don't, when you go to find the bottleneck, if you went into a factory, you'd wander around and look at them all and look for queues of work. You'd ask the people who've been working for a while what they think. When you do this with software teams, if you come in, it feels like it's running smoothly and the developers are getting everything that they need and quickly, and you go, oh, okay, this actually feels like it's running quite well. It's dev. Otherwise, it's most likely, if the team is relatively new, going to be test. and if it's and it's also most likely, if not that, it's going to be customer. And in fact, what you'll find is that because the problem is not really where is the bottleneck, but oh look, it's not development, so we have too many developers. So suddenly you go, oh, that means that we actually need more customer input, because they're a bottleneck if we try and keep the developers busy, or it's testing. So it's always customer or testing, or it's both of them. It's either one or the other, or both. So let's just look at the one where it's testing. So if I come here, we'll just put, let's say we've found a situation where it's testing. Now, I just want you guys, if you can, to come off mute. And I'll just lay this out here. And I just want you to see now, I have defined testing just in that little diagram there. I'll just make it a bit bigger. Testing is now the bottleneck. And we've looked at this, we've slowed stuff down. We can look and see testing's now the bottleneck. And we know that instinctively, we should slow the developers down. And everyone gets freaked out by that. But suddenly that means, hey, look, we know we've got to do it, but how can we coordinate things differently? That's the first C. How can we collaborate? How can the developers help the testers? And how can we maybe curate the work so that the testing capacity goes up? So that what we want to do is we effectively want to say, hang on, we're going to slow these down here to run at the same speed as testing. And then we want to use that extra capacity that the developers now have to move this up so it looks like that. Okay, so could you guys come off mute and just, and so this is kind of like the brainstorming thing, just think of just some little tiny thing that you might do or might have done in the past. And if you like, I can start you off with one in the Bottleneck Rules book, that one there. The last the chapter with Eve and her whiteboards was exactly this situation. And one of the things that the developers found is that they could sit down now that they had time, and they could actually manage the testing environments that the testers were using and just make them so much easier. So they effectively took work that the testers weren't very good at and hated doing, and they gave it to the developers, and the developers were good at it. And it just freed up a lot of time for the testers and worked really, really well. So is there any other suggestions, any thoughts of just some little thing that you might do? You come in and you find that it looks like that.
There's this, I mean, there's a few things I think you could do, but just to pick out one, which aligns to maybe to what you were saying, you can either pick, maybe look specifically for items in a backlog that require less testing. So you're trying to be more selective about the composition of your backlog, what's going through development, so hey, maybe this is more heavy on the development, less on the test side, and looking for that composition. So that I'll offer that one up for now. But
okay, so that's beautiful. That's curate. So you're looking at the work and you're going, oh, look, normally it would just flow through and we wouldn't think about bottlenecks. And normally it would flow through, and often we'd just look at how much developer work was required. But hang on, we know our bottlenecks testing. So if we've got something there, we could go down that queue of stuff that's here, and we could actually go to our customer. Actually, it's effectively a lot more expensive to do stuff that requires a lot more testing work than we had taken into account. If you want more value out of this team, you'll find that the stuff that requires less testing work is actually less costly than we instinctively thought. That's really good. Anything else? Anyone there?
Automate some of the testing.
Oops, could you say that again, Matt?
Get the developers to automate some of the testing because they're very good at automating stuff. So get them to automate a lot of the some of the stuff that might be done manually by the testers now.
Yeah, yeah. That's the classic. As you know, the classic, which isn't great, is that they used to get developers to do the testing with their fingertips, which just made everyone grumpy. Oh God, I remember having to do that. I did 2 days worth of testing once, and I still feel bruised by the experience, and the testers didn't like it. So but that's a far more elegant one. You look and you go, oh, you guys, and so it's not just the testing, it could be like the setting up of data. That's a really helpful one. That takes a lot of manual effort. So what you do is you sit with developers and testers, say, hey, look, is there anything you do that that is possible that we might be able to automate for you? And the testers, if they're really busy because of the bottleneck, they might go, oh, I don't know. Hadn't thought of it, hadn't had time to think of it. But it doesn't take long, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And you go, look, if we did this, that'd probably free you guys up 5%, 10%, 20%, which is really, really, really helpful. Yeah, so I like that, Matt. Yeah.
Right.
Jim, did you have your hand up for a reason on the thing?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
So one of the things that we've done is supply acceptance tests in advance with the requirements, so that when the developers are going through their development process, they can pre-test some of these things before they actually hand them off to the quality assurance group.
Beautiful. So that, in a way, that I'm trying to think how to frame that. It's probably a coordination thing, because you've changed the order of when you do things.
Right.
It's also, in a way, it's like a little mini version of curating each individual story or request that comes through, and cleaning it up before it goes through. It's classic Agile. I'm really intrigued though, because I don't work directly with Agile teams anymore. I work with their bosses and their bosses. So I had kind of vaguely assumed when I talked to people that it was standard practice that people did that nowadays, because it always was when I was doing Agile. Is that, do people worry about that now? I've heard that from a Scrum point of view, they're more worried about the just following the rituals, and they haven't maybe got the test first thinking. I really don't know. Is there
from an analyst position, you want to be able to convey requirements that achieve a specific outcome, and the only way to really ensure that they will is to have acceptance tests that show that they will.
Yes.
So
yeah.
It's better than just throwing new work to testers and they're just going to blindly go through the system and try to break things.
Yep, it's beautiful. So one of the things with that is that, how I was talking about how you get you brainstorm and you get and but then often if you can 80-20 something, what you've described is a very elegant 80-20ing of things, because a lot of the time when people think of test first stuff, they think of automating it, and automating stuff is really, really good. But actually just getting that little conversation, how will we know when it's actually, what's the acceptance criteria look like? Let's clarify this before we build it. Is really, really, it's just very, it's an 80-20 thing that often adds a huge amount of value. And then you may go on to automate it. Okay, cool. Anything else there? Any other thoughts? No. Okay, so you don't need any more. So the beautiful thing about this is that if you're going to do this, you go to your team, you frame the problem, which is the F and FBI, and then you just ask for instinctive responses. How would you do this? And then you help them bounce off ideas, get a new one, tweak it. It's very hard to do it just generally, but in this specific case, you'll always get a whole bunch of ideas, and then someone will smile, or you'll see light bulbs come on in their eyes, and I'm sure you've all seen this, and I'm sure you've all facilitated sessions like this. Sorry, I'm getting a guy from Terry. He's a bricklayer. I will just turn off. Hang on, no, that's putting me to sleep. No, it's not. That'll do. Sorry about that. You're seeing Terry is from the south of England. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you focus, you're in the conversation, you've figured out, this is your first step, you figured out, I think I know where the bottleneck is. And then you wander around and you just sort of talk to people and just clarify that it's not other bits, because sometimes your instinctive bit of where the bottleneck will be, if you need to go and kind of disprove that it's not other areas. And that might take you longer. And it's really frustrating when you're actually almost certain where it is, but it's really good for a group to do it. And then you go, great, okay, we've done the F. And now we're going to brainstorm. So you just ask for suggestions and you help pull them out of the group little bit by little bit. And then you bounce off things. And then you say, that's really good. Anything similar to that? And then you go, okay, look, so that sounded like it was like we coordinate things differently. Yeah. Is there anything we could do where we looked at the stuff, maybe where we curated it? And just open the ideas up and get them bouncing backwards and forwards. And then you've got a bunch of stickies, say, that have got these ideas, or you might just come in and you just go, right, this is one thing that we do. We think, gosh, it's interesting. It could get 10 or 15%, which, more, free up 10 to 15% of testings capacity and move it to the developers, and everyone's feeling good about it. But that's 10 or 15% for a whole team. So that's like getting an extra staff member for many teams. So little tiny improvements in one of these dots here can have really, really big improvements for the whole team. Okay, so I'm going to leave the testing one here because I don't want to be specific about the actual things you do, because you already know what to do. I just want you to have the framing of think about it in terms of bottleneck, and then think about it as giving the problem to a team to solve, and then prompting them with the focus formula sort of steps as and when you need to. But whatever you do, don't try and get everything. Don't try and boil the ocean. You don't have a whole big thing for this. Just do it like you would in a retrospective. Okay, well, this week we're going to try doing this, and then when we have our next retrospective, we'll just have a bit of a chat about it, see how it's going, and see how it works. Okay, so I'm going to have just a 5-minute break in a moment. I just want to finish this section just by telling you quickly about an example. A really quick example, because I want you to know how powerful this can be. So I talk about 10 or 15% there. That's absolutely enormous. And if you said to any team, I could get you 10 or 15% improvement with a small tweak until I understood the logic of it. That it sounds like a little piddly thing, especially if it's only for, say, if there's 2 testers out of, say, 10 or 15 people, and you get them, but it's for the whole team. So it doesn't sound nearly as exciting, but often you get far, far more than that. So when was it? It was about 3 years ago. I was with a government department here in New Zealand, and I was helping them out. And they have this big transformation project going on. And then one of the senior managers said to me, hey, look, I suppose you got an hour or so later today, because we've got a really big problem and I just need someone to bounce it off. Right, I'm just wondering if you could help me. So we booked out an hour and a half, and we went to a local cafeteria that was nice and empty. We sat down and we just drew out, and I can't show you the picture, and if I did, it wouldn't make anything, because it wasn't make any sense, because it was lots of scribblings and circles like this, but with loops around and things here, and little, there's a decision point here and stuff, and there's a fuel tank here of stuff, and and it was just an absolute mess with lots of circles, and it looked like it was chaos. And we drew this out, and he said, look, but before we drew that, he said, look, the problem is we've got 120 testers who are working on testing all of this work that's been done for this transformation project, that for this stage of it. So 120 testers. And currently we're going a quarter of the speed that we thought we would. And it's not just like the early days. We're convinced that this is the speed that we're going. And so the guy who's running this, who's the most, probably the most highly paid civil servant in the country, has to go and talk to the Minister of Finance lot of pressure. And there's a financial year is switching over. So this really is a lot of pressure. And so we sat down and we drew this big, ugly diagram and we looked at it. And then we looked at one little decision box where stuff went that way or that way. And I said, there seems to be a lot of things in that way there. Is your quality that bad? He goes, no. He goes, oh. And he looked inside this 120 people plus management sort of system just drawn out on one page. And he realized that little tiny bit there, people were erring on the side of immense caution rather than erring on the side of the opposite of that. So he went back and he just said to his team, look, clearly we're being overly conservative and overly safe there. And I don't that's just making things worse. Switch it to the other way so that in most cases stuff flows to the right. And then that prevented a big rework loop. And then 4 days later, after many months of being this way, their productivity shot up by over 4 times as much. But only because they went through and they just found that one little tiny point there where they had to just get the screwdriver out and just turn this thing ever so slightly. And that's what we're trying to do with this stuff. That was a bottleneck, but it wasn't a bottleneck in this sort of the classic sense that you might think of it. But it was definitely, there was one point where one resource was going there and we just switched it. So you can have really, really big effects just by looking for the one point. Okay, so if we just take 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes or so, and we'll just we'll come back, and then I'll wait till you're all back and we'll just get on with it. But we're on track time-wise, and we've got a few more examples of different places where the bottleneck is in just a minute. Okay, so I will go and pause.
Clark, I need to leave because it's very, very late in Italy and
Of
I'm
course
very tired. So
you'll get the second half on video. I'll upload it for you.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Okay, cheers. Thank you for coming on. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. See you.
Hey, Matt.
Hello,
Jim.
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, that's good to stretch the legs.
Yeah.
I love standing up. It's so much easier to talk when, and do this. I think the body takes on a different mode. But then if you're not careful, your legs it get really painful.
Does the bike riding help?
Actually, the bike riding makes it worse. Actually, no, I think it probably makes it better. I'm just learning to stretch with it. I went for a big, long bike ride yesterday. And it was really good, but I got a new bike and I think it actually, I was just leaning differently. So my whole back was like, oh, I'm getting old.
Had you ever heard of a bike called the Forerunner? It's out of Australia. And it's an upright, it's a stand-up bike. And it's supposed to mimic the actual path of a runner's gait and stride.
No.
Yeah.
Actually, that makes sense because you look at people when they're along cycling and it doesn't actually look natural.
No, it doesn't. I used to ride a bike a lot, but where I live now, it's not really safe. There's just too many cars.
Right.
But if I was looking at this Forerunner, unfortunately, they don't bring too many into the United States, but it's used apparently for rehabilitating runners and such if they get hurt.
I could see that. And that'd be lovely because it wouldn't have the friction and the pounding of running.
Right.
Yeah. That's good. Oh, there's so many clever things in the world, aren't there?
There are. There are, just like this.
Just like, exactly. Okay, right. So why don't we carry on then? And I've just done a little bit here. In fact, let me... one of the things I find is it's actually quite handy. I can change things on Miro more easily on my big screen here in front of me than I can on the iPad. So I just done a little bit of prep there. But if you guys are looking at this one here still, so let me just wrap that bit up there. So you want to use the FBI with the focus formula and really just your common sense, but you just want to just grab bits. And then what you're going to do is, just to play that out again. Oh, sorry, I'm not using the right mouse here. You're going to move this down by slowing the developers down, which you've got to do anyway. But then you're going to move this one here up a little bit by little bit by little bit, and then you're going to U shape, and then you're going to protect it. One of the things that will almost certainly happen is that when you get there, if you're not careful, is that the testers will start going, oh, we've got spare capacity now. Why don't we start doing this other type of testing? And if they're not talking to everyone, actually, I'll give a truthful, real example. I did this with a team and I got it running just perfectly. There were 80 developers on it, bunch of testers. It was just, it was wonderful. And I go, wow, this is amazing. And so I left the team to their own, and the testers, they've got so much faster. They've just done so much clever stuff. The capacity shot up. The developers, they were working together. They were, they were talking about. They were having meetings before they built anything. They cut out so much rework. It was just magic. And so the developers' capacity actually shot up as well because of the amount of rework that was got rid of. But the testers shot up, and they were just. It was like this. And then the tester says, "Oh, why don't we start doing something which is really sensible? Why don't we start?" Now that we have spare time, buddying up with things with each other so we can learn new areas. Really, really good idea. But that had the immediate effect because they didn't do it taking into account, they didn't do it incrementally. They did it a bit swiftly. And suddenly it went like that. So we don't want to do that. Oh, hang on. Now, I need to just come down here and tell you one more thing about testing. Somewhere here. Yeah, come down here. And then, in fact, it's just a clarification. Right. It's really important here, and for the sake of simplifying things, I have not mentioned this till now, but it's really important to distinguish between capacity and capability. Okay, so capacity is how much you can do, and capability is what you can do and how good are you at it. So this will come in handy in just a few minutes, but it's also really important. So that's something that we don't do, and it's we kind of do it, but only half-heartedly. And a lot of the logistical stuff from the theory of constraints is about looking at how much, which is the capacity thing, not just how. And when you add that layer on, it just makes it far more real. Now, the second point here, capability versus the role or the step. So when you look and you go, yes, our steps are, we have a customer get some stuff, we design some stuff or analyze it, and then we code it, and then we test it. Those are the steps. We're not looking at the steps, and we're not looking at the role either. So we're not looking at the test step or the test role. We're looking at our test capacity. So when you do that, you've got that distinction between how much capacity for testing have we got versus how many tester hours have we got. So when you make that distinction, suddenly you can go, oh, look, the developers actually do quite a lot of testing. So how could we increase our testing capacity by not just hiring more testers? It's just really useful to separate them. And again, it's the same with it's analysis, not analyst. So if you have analysts doing a job, when I was a programmer many years ago, my job title was analyst programmer. And no one actually ever thought to put tester on the end of it because we did all our own testing. So you've got three things there. Well, one is the capability. Sorry, you've got the capability, and then you've got the role that typically does that capability, and often it's a step. We're interested in the resource that does that type of work, of that capability. it's just really useful just to think about it that way. And that's why I've got the example there with testing. We can do automated testing. We also look at the work that testers do. A lot of it's often manual work that could be automated, even if it's not actually running tests. Manual testing could be done by other people. But the most useful bit of all of this that actually comes out of it is that when you use the focus formula, you start looking in and you start figuring out how can we collaborate together to do all of this. And it's just lovely when, and you guys know this, given what your work is, you know that when you start getting people together and you start getting them creatively problem solving, partially the productivity just goes up because they enjoy working together more. But there's all these little sparks of cleverness that come around. But what they have to have framed in their head is that that capability is the bottleneck. And we actually want to make sure it is development that is the bottleneck. So we've got to keep those things in mind. Okay, right. I'm not going to actually, I'll tell you very quickly about the fry pan thing. One of the things that I have found in the past that's really useful is that, but it's more of when people move from waterfall to agile, they thought they had to do all sorts of regression testing. That they thought they had to run complete regression tests every 2 weeks when they switched. And then this diagram here, it's just supposed to be a little thing that shows that, and it wasn't clear to people because they were just in the habits of what they used to do. When we switched to incremental stuff, if you made a change, then then you because it was just a small change and it was well managed and isolated and very clear, and it wasn't jumbled up with a whole lot of others, you could, the yoke on this picture was the stuff that you change, and you want to test that worked as positive testing. You then want to check around with the white of the fried egg was the stuff that you go, gosh, we really have to check that that's been regression tested. That we haven't, while we've changed this stuff here, broken something next door to it. And then around it, there's this whole lot of other stuff that probably doesn't need to be tested all the time, but you're going to want to run some form of regression testing over the whole lot, just to make sure you haven't broken something, by some weird accident. When in the old days, when I used to help people switch from waterfall to agile, a lot of the times people will carry on. They wouldn't make the distinction between these levels of testing, so they would end up doing far too much testing. Yeah, so I want to leave it at that for testing, but it's just a really good example. But the overarching lesson from it is that you find the bottleneck, you brainstorm, and then you implement incrementally. And what you're trying to do is move like we did here. You want to move, the amount of testing capacity, which probably includes automated tests, so it sits up there above the developers. Okay, so that's just really all it is. And then once you got it there, you want to protect it. Okay, now if you can go to the right, you will see there's another one here. I just copied that one. Now, this one here, let's say we've got this looking.
Sorry to interject, but
yes, no, go for it.
It's funny with the U-shaped team thing, because when I got introduced to the concept, on reflection, I realized the teams I'd worked with, it had naturally been that way. The ones that flew. But if I was going into somewhere and I was trying to explain to some senior manager who, was responsible for the purse strings or what have you not, and saying, look, I want to move our bottleneck so it is the developers. What's the best kind of way to explain to him why I want to do that, so someone who hasn't seen this and doesn't understand it can understand it?
Right. Okay, that's a really good question, Matt. And I have struggled with it for years because it's so obvious when you actually get it. But it's so non-obvious. The first objection that people have, we don't want a bottleneck. And then the second one, once they understand that you're going to have a bottleneck, you go, oh, okay. Well, we definitely don't want it to be developers. They're the ones that build the stuff. We want them to. So the understanding of things is that you add more developers. The instincts say if you want to go faster, you add more developers. This is one of the curses of this theory of constraint stuff, and and other things like it, is that it fights against intuition, and intuition says keep everyone busy, and we don't want any bottlenecks, and we definitely don't want our developers to be the bottleneck because we have to add more. So one of the things that I've started doing, and I've done it for a long time, but not with the U-shaped team because I struggled to get an analogy that worked, is rather than an analogy like, obviously you could show them a funnel and you go, well, look, you want the bottleneck there, or you could show them this little fella. You could show them this, and that kind of gets the concept across. But there's a story I've been using more recently, which I think actually helps people get it. It was of a local private doctor. It's a friend of mine, Graham Scott, who you guys may have seen if you've seen our little webcast things. He told me this story, and he was helping a dental surgery, so private dental surgery, and he went along to the guy, and he was helping him out, and the guy says, I want to make more money, or says, I'm not making enough money. And Graham in his old life was an accountant, and so he says, oh, okay. So he didn't tell him any accounting stuff. He just said, oh, tell me how many people you got. So he drew a diagram like this, and rather than developers on it, he had, well, it was him. In fact, why don't I duplicate this, and I'll see if I can just do a quick version of what he did. And I'm going to I'm going to grab this guy, I'm going to pop him down below. Just go private surgeon. It's just useful, this one, to get a person to solve the problem in an area that's not their own. And then you go, okay, who's your equivalent of the surgeon, right? So rather than developers, we have surgeon times 1. And then we have people supporting the surgeon. The flow doesn't, there's a receptionist. There's nurses. There's maybe post-op beds. Maybe they have a small supporting one that's not obvious, like they have a little catering thing. They're going to have, gosh, probably a really important one, surgery, the actual space itself. And I'm going to change that to a square like that, and I have no idea why. So I'm going to change it to bold, because that's often hospitals, that's the bottleneck, but in this case it wasn't. And then I have operating equipment. Okay, so and I'll just make that bigger just so you can see the word. Oh, we'll get rid of the word operations because that's not a very useful one. We'll get rid of that. Maybe we have actually, what have I done? Okay, I'm not sure what I've done then, but we'll come back to this. Sorry. Over here. Apologies. Maybe over here we have this marketing department, because he has to, sell this stuff. Oh, maybe he has a sales manager. We'll get rid of that. So I'm making up stuff here. But basically he gets people, they come in, they have a sales conversation, they get booked in, they go some stage in the surgery, and they need all of these things here. And this is just a dump of the resources. So just what we've done here. Now I'm overly explaining it for you. If you're using this kind of thing, just wrap it up and just turn it into a simple story. So I'm just trying to show that we use the same process here. Now, Graham said to this guy, "Oh, okay, I see how you do this. Right now, is there anything here?" And in fact, this ties into what my next thing on the Kanban thing was, is that this is what I call the magic wand question. Is there anything on here, if you wanted to treat more people, and invoice more people, make more money, is there anything on here if you had a magic wand and you could just go, ba-ding, and double the capacity of it? What would it be? And the surgeon goes, oh, it'd be me, of course, because I'm the one that does the operations and I can't do this. Yeah, oh, okay. All right. So if you did that, would you be able to actually, as a business, and would you actually be able to treat more people? He goes, well, no, we wouldn't, because I wouldn't have enough surgery space to do that, because I'm already operating 6 hours a day, so that I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have enough nurses, wouldn't have enough this, wouldn't have enough that. There's not enough beds. Okay, all right, okay, so it's not that. Okay, come back now. What else could it be if you just wanted to get a small improvement, say 20% more patients seen, 20% more patient? And being a private doctor, he's doing the numbers and he knows, oh my goodness, that's another yacht. Excellent. Okay, so no, it's not me. Well, actually, there is it's going to sound silly when I tell you this, but over there in the corner, there's the operating equipment that we use, the scalpels, this and this and this. And when we use those, we have plenty of those, but there's a thing we use to clean them, to disinfect and clean them after we've done them, so that we could use them. And it's a thing that you buy, and it's a cabinet and it's plugged in. Okay, how much would that cost to get another one of those? I don't know. Well, do you think it's the sort of thing that you'd pay for it within a week of doing 20% more surgeries and charging people for it? Oh, I would think so. So there was his bottleneck in terms of growing. So now I've kind of conflated things here by giving you a demonstration of so that's the magic wand question. If you can magic up stuff, what would you do? And often it's a little support thing on the edge. So if you're explaining to someone else, just imagine local surgery, right? You've got one surgeon there, and they're the ones that do all of the cutting. That's what they do. They cut people up. They're kind of like the code cutters, that we have, that the ones that actually do that. And then everyone else around them is effectively supporting that work, because that's where the value work gets done. Not that everyone else isn't valuable. Everyone else is supporting the cutting of either people on our operating table or of code. So if we want to get more done, we need to make sure that we build our system around this really important surgeon or the people that are doing the work. And to do that, what you want to do is, they'll be a bottleneck, but actually really what they are is a leverage point. And we need to stack capacity up around them so that they have plenty of support to do that. So like if you go back to the surgery example, he looked at that and he realized, well, look, for a few $1,000s, I could get another one of those. And that might save 10, 20 minutes every 2 hours from when they swapped over, because they were able to have surgery equipment prepared and just ready to go without a gap in between. And then the next step was he decided that he needed to get one more nurse. And he's going, oh, I don't really want to employ someone else. But well, what was the actual cost of employing someone else compared to the actual benefit of the better flow of work, better preparation? He could actually schedule more surgeries just because of one extra person there. And the actual cost for them was this much. The actual financial return was probably that much. Easily. Okay, so I have conflated there while I've been answering out loud. So I just sum it up for the telling someone else's story. Find something like that that's not in the area, and don't talk about it being a bottleneck. Not to start with. Just talk about being, look, in any system, there's like a leveraged resource. And what you want to do is you want to find that leveraged resource, such as the one which actually does the is not a commodity. It has specialist knowledge. It's hard to do this, and it's usually the person that or the people that are actually doing what people might describe as their value work. It's not always, but it often is. And then you want to stack the capacity around them. And the easiest way to stack the capacity around them is to use your brains to figure out how to do that, rather than just go hire other people. Now, I'm conscious I've used a lot of words here, Matt, but thinking on your feet, don't use the word bottleneck, because that will trigger people. Use it later once they've got the sense of what you do. Okay, so we actually have a deliberate bottleneck. That's quite different from an untamed one, but don't go there straight away. Just talk about, look, there's a strategic value-adding resource in the team. If it was a surgery down the road or the dentist, it's going to be the dentist or the surgeon. If it was like me, I'm going to cringe now, but I run a thought leader style business. So clearly you'd rather have capacity to do things supporting me doing more of that than me doing, I would be the strategic resource. And in development, it is the developers, and you want to do that. The other angle for it is that it's hard for people to understand initially, is that, so don't tell them about this, is that if you don't do that, your productivity is way down. Like it could be 20, 30, 40% of what it should be, compared to having it in the right place. But if you tell them that up front, they'll think you're telling them stories and overselling. So just paint it as, look, if you want to go faster, do that there, stack the resources around it. We'll go faster. And guess what? It won't cost us anything, because we're just going to do it by tweaking our system. Okay, that should have probably been, that last sentence should have been my first answer. Okay, so how about I shoot up here, and I will just do the customer one now, but we're looking good for time. Okay, so now let's say we've got this, this was what it was like there. Everything was the same. We actually got a good U-shaped team, and yet the customer capacity is down like this. Okay. Now, I earlier made the distinction between a customer, whatever their role title is. They're the ones that not only prioritize, but they tend to tell you what to do, and they actually are a supplier of raw materials for your team. So they actually have those two roles, which gets confusing. But now, if their capacity is down, what you'll almost always find is that sometimes these guys are compensating for their lack of capacity a bit, which is actually good. You know, instinctively, that's doing what we want to do. But oftentimes, the whole team is actually being very, very, very efficient. Okay, so they might be very, 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 very efficient, and they're running away and they're working off a backlog. But the backlog, because the customer's not there, is actually not a very good quality backlog. So it's like garbage in, garbage out, but really quickly. So what we want to do is figure out how to get the customer to move back, not necessarily so they're way up here, but so they're here. And the main thing we want them to do, actually there's a few things, but we don't want them to feel like that they just have to keep the developers busy. Okay, so that's the big problem, is that when they're under pressure, the customers, if you get some IT CIO goes along to your customer wearing big boots and they have a big argument, you need to blah, 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 blah. The customer can, if they want to, very easy go, of course, sorry, we didn't know this. And then they just go back, they look at their backlogs of things that they want, and they go, I need to feed the developers to take the pressure off me. So I wander down the list. Here we go. I'll grab this guy here. And I will feed that one there into the team, because what I'm looking at there is I've carefully curated it. It's actually low value, but it's going to keep the development team busy. Okay, so that really happens a lot. So here's what we do when we want to do that. where's this one on the diagram here? We wander around to this one. Okay, but by the way, we are close to finishing in about 15 minutes, but we'll be on time. And if you guys want to ask questions after that, you're very welcome to, but we will finish the content bit here. So with this bit, you've realized that, oh my goodness, we've actually got a team that's working well, they're efficient, but they're not effective because they're working on the wrong stuff because the customer is too busy. They have two jobs. They're really, really busy. They don't have enough time for this. Maybe they're feeling a bit sort of nervous. They don't know how to be a customer. So most of the time, our instincts kind of go a little bit into blaming mode, and we say that they're not motivated. Or they don't care about us. And sometimes they'll have tribal wars going on, and they'll be saying bad things about the development teams. They're so slow. And so what we want to do is bring them together. And it's not motivation always. In fact, it's usually not motivation. So there's two ways to do this. One is you could try and sell all this stuff. Go, agile, theory of constraints. So this is wonderful. And all they hear is blah, 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 blah. Or they might hear, yes, I know it's wonderful. It's great. But what you don't understand is that I've got two jobs. I'm head of marketing in one of those jobs. And then the other time I'm trying to feed 150 developers here with my team. So I'm really, really scarce of time. Okay, it's a lot of pressure. So rather than selling them on the benefits of it, what we want to do is make it easier. So if you have a look at the title of this box here, up here, motivation versus ease. If we're talking about a bottleneck, it's time problem. So what we want to do is we want to help them and make it easier for them to be the customer of the team. So we want to look at them, and actually there's sort of kind of like three places they can be here. So you could look at them and go, say in this corner here, we've got capacity versus competence. Sorry, I'll move that there. When we're looking at this one here, if they're in this quarter, they're competent at being a product owner or a product manager or a customer, whatever you call it. And the whole team's actually competent, that they just don't have enough capacity to do it. So what we'll do is use we've done the F, we know that they're the bottleneck, and now we'll go get the team together of our people, and we'll go, look, this person here, they're so busy. What can we do using the focus formula or just brainstorming? How can we do things to make it easier for them? And what you'll find is that the same sort of things come up again. So like Jim, your example of acceptance criteria beforehand, what you'll find, something similar to that, is that you'll have developers or analysts or testers who have been working on the technical side of the team, and they actually really know the system inside out. They know it far better than any head of whatever who's supposed to be leading this, and often better than the subject matter experts. So what we can do is not take the whole job of preparing stuff off the front end of the system, but we can get the analysts, the people with analytical skills who can write, to actually have a look at stuff and work with the customer and help them come up with better solutions. The customer still has that yay or nay. They still provide the input, but they don't have to do all of the grunt work of thinking things through. We can help them, and that's how that's how well operating teams work anyway. They don't have that separation, so we just want to get the more technical people in this flow, figuring out how can we help them. So we use them. We use the focus formula, and we just find stuff that makes it easier for them to have time to do this job. By offloading to other people. One of the things that I've used a lot, which is really, really helpful. In fact, I just had this same thing with some people this week that I'm working with, a team of 50 developers. The customer is just overwhelmed and has too much to do. And so one of the simplest little things we're doing is just putting in a wee office hours thing, 2 or 3 days a week, 1 hour each morning, so 3 hours a week total, with this person who's just overwhelmed with work. and has too much to do and can't do their job properly, gets time where the people in the development team can just go and get time with her, several times a week. So they've got dedicated time. It's just really low pressure. It's just very easy for them to go get answers nice and quickly. And it not only builds up the relationship between them, which is really important, but it actually gets their questions answered much more quickly. So that's just a simple coordination thing. And so there's lots of things that you can do there. But again, it's the important bit is the FBI process of doing it. Just collaborate and treat it like a problem-solving exercise. And the difference is that your brainstorming is focused because you know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get that customer, their relative capacity increased, but using the capacity of all those other people in that loop. It's exactly the same process. If you've got this one here, they've got plenty of capacity, but maybe they haven't got the skills to do it. So again, within the team, there's usually skills that can help them do it. But again, just use the FBI process to just go through, here's the problem. How can we help? How can we collaborate and help our customer find it easier to engage? And what you'll find is that it's just easier. It's just that no one solved it before. And most people are trying to solve it from a motivation point of view. If you're down in this corner where they don't have the capacity or the skills, sometimes this involves an escalation. And often it could be, we need someone else to come in and help this person. And they might need coaching. They just need a bit more of an investment because they're really struggling and they're probably in a really bad place. And your project or your initiative's in a really bad place because of it. Okay. So you've just seen there the two most important. The testing, and you guys already know how to do all of this for the testing. The customer, it's harder because often you find that it requires a different skill set to have those conversations with a customer. So this is the last little bit on the customer that is really important. You need to think of it as a change where you are helping the customer, but you want to make sure you've got your ducks lined up in a row where you've got support around you. And ideally, you're not just sending a junior scrum master to go and have a conversation with the head of operations who has 250 call center people there saying, could you spend some more time with this, please? You need to make, that's when maybe management, you need management skills. And it's going to depend on where you are, who you are. But it's not for someone that's maybe thin-skinned and not experienced, because you're working in a much a different type of people. It's not just process changes within a team. There's different skills involved. So often there it might be talking to an IT manager, but coaching them through how we go to help the customer engage, not go and kick them and demand that they just add more time. Okay, so I am now going to wander up here. Let's just have a look at our Kanban board. Here we go. So let me just check and see where we are. So we started here, we looked and we went bottlenecks of resources. Yep, so that laid out our first little yellow one here. Really important point with that. There's a lot more resources than you might realize. And when you get the thing running smoothly, actually, at any time, they could actually be a serious bottleneck, but you might not have thought of them that way. So it's just worth listening them out. You're talking 5 to 10 minutes worth of work here. Your instincts when you do this will be to only focus on the bit which is in your sphere of control, that the stuff that you actually find it easy to work with. If you go out a level, what you find is that your impact as a person over time will grow enormously, and you'll actually be able to solve the root cause of problems, because oftentimes it's how the whole system works together. So we then looked at protect and grow. So once you've got your bottleneck there, protect it. That's partly education, but actually it's largely education, making people aware that you actually don't just happen to have a team that has lots of spare capacity, but that's deliberate, and that's how you end up being really, really fast. When you grow, you've got to make sure that you grow around the resource, so that the ships on the aircraft carrier, if it can suddenly go twice as fast, all the ships in the fleet have to go faster as well, so that they can keep up with it. Otherwise, they'll become the bottleneck, which you don't want. If you've got the bottleneck is not development, and this is the rest of what we talked about, then you want to do the throttleneck thing, limiting WIP, which is what you should be doing in Agile anyway. It's just the first step, and that'll kind of give you a lot more visibility, and it'll give you information when you try and do it if you find it hard as well. And then you use the FBI combined with the focus to just go, okay, right, now what we want to do is take whatever shape we've got and get it so that we slow the developers down, and then we get everyone else helping so that the developers have good quality inputs, and we just figure out how to help them using the things in the focus formula. But we don't run through like a bunch of plodding consultants and go off and write a report about the focus report. Here's our focus, here's our recommendations, we do this, this, and this. What we do is we get people together in a nice agile way and just treat it like an ad hoc retrospective, use the same kind of thing. We frame the problem. Right, okay, so we know we've got a bottleneck. And clearly, if it's not dev, it's almost certainly going to be testing or your customer or both. Okay, so then we just run through with the FBI, we get their ideas, we massage them, we talk about them, and then we just cherry pick the first few, and then we just have a nice little rhythm of just seeing how's it going. We sometimes you can fix things in a day or two, and make an enormous improvement. Sometimes it takes months. Yeah, so you just figure it out, but you don't try and boil the ocean and do it all at once. Moving across here, we looked at the customer. And now that point about the supplier, customer, and being a supplier as well, that's really important, because if you just treat them as a supplier, as a customer of your factory, like if you'd read Ellie Goldratt's The Goal, that's not right. They're also the supplier of your raw materials, so they belong inside your system, and they are almost always the bottleneck. They're the hardest bit to do because they're outside the control of the IT team, and we want to get around that. The magic wand question, if you're going to go and try and find your bottleneck and you got all of these things are invisible and you can't go, I don't know, I can't see anything, everyone looks really, 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 really busy, you go out and go, look, if I had a magic wand or an Apple Pencil, and I could just wave it magically and just photocopy, if I could put one type of resource or person or computer, or I don't know what it would be, what would it be if I could put it through a magic photocopier and out the other end shot some really, really 20% more capacity of one thing, what would it be? And then you sit back and you let people think through. They will instinctively go to the equivalent of, we just need more surgeons, or we need more developers. But then if you ask them to step forward from that and think it through, they go, oh no, if we did that, we wouldn't have enough testing capacity, or we wouldn't have enough desks. We wouldn't have enough surgery. The surgery couldn't cope. So you just run it through like a thought experiment, and then you talk about things, and then you go, actually, I think it's that, isn't it? And then it's just that magic wand question is really magical because it's so easy, and it just gets people, you just talk about the answers. And then now I want to show you this one here. This should be, let me get this. I'm just going to duplicate this guy, but I'm not going to zoom in. Right. The messy situation is when you go in to a team and you look and you run the magic wand question around, and people come back and they say, honestly, we haven't got enough testers. Okay, cool. And you get that from some people. That's your answer. Okay, great. testing must be the bottleneck. And then you go talk to another lot and they go, customer can't keep up. They can't feed us enough good fuel fast enough. So you go, oh, okay, customer must be the bottleneck, right? And then they go, oh yeah, but we've got a lot of defects. Honestly, our tech leads are stretched. You go, oh, okay. Tech leads must be the bottleneck. But then you go, but there can only be one bottleneck. How can we have three bottlenecks? And when you will come across this, and you just get this, and you go, this doesn't make any sense. But each bit of logic makes sense. And the problem is that the problem they're trying to solve for is keeping all of the developers busy. So they've got 100 developers, but they can only keep 80 of them. The optimal size would be 80. So that's why everyone else looks like they're the bottleneck. You haven't got enough customer capacity to feed 100 developers. You haven't got enough tech leads to feed another, to support and coach, etc., 100 developers. You haven't got enough test capacity to test the amount of code that's produced by 100 developers. So often this U-shaped team will actually present like this, where it's effectively an N-shaped team. It's kind of upside down, and your big problem is actually just fundamentally that you have far too many developers. Okay, now I'm just going to show you, if you've got a messy situation like this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go to my board over here, and I'm going to, you should see this as I'm going to, hang on. I'm just going to update this. There's a really useful thing you can do here. I'm going to do this here. Okay, now, yep, that's coming up there. All right, I'm going to get this guy. You'll see this here. You should see two circles come in. Right. Okay, so now don't worry about looking at the zooming in and the detail in this. It's just when you get the situation where there's, oh my God, we've got too many bottlenecks, but really what you've got is the problem that you've got an N-shaped team or a really messily shaped team. One of the things that simplifies it is that you can draw a circle around the customer and draw a circle around the more technical parts of it and look at them in parallel. So if you think of bottleneck theory, you know, the typical stuff that you get, you think, oh no, we only want to look at the bottleneck, but really we're not got a bottleneck problem here. We've got too many developers problem here, and we want to make them the bottleneck problem. So what you can do is you can set off two different streams of work, do them in parallel. One is to go, look, how can we make it easier for our customer to engage with us so we get better quality inputs? That's one discussion, and with the people involved in that, it's probably quite well compartmentalized from the, oh, hey, look, we need to figure out tech leads. We need to figure out, haven't got enough tech lead capacity. What can we do? How can we tackle this? We haven't got enough tests. How can we look at this and solve it as a problem together using the focus formula and the FBI thing? But just treat those as two different things, and they can wander along together. And if you only had the choice between the two of them, I don't know what's best. If you could only do one, it might be, we've got no one that can talk to our customer, and they keep mocking us because they just say, look at your defect counts, in which case you might go, okay, so why don't we get our defect counts down? And one way to do that would actually be to figure out how to give our tech leads space to do coaching, or maybe we figure out how to get the senior developers time to do that because there's not enough senior developer time to do coaching. So you sort out maybe your internal thing before you go have your discussion with your customer. That's one thing. Sorry, Siri just said, I don't know why. The other angle is with the customer bit. If you're actually, if you're actually trying, actually, I think, Jim, you may have, there's some technical, I'll see what happens there. So there was a technical glitch went on there. Jim's come back. Hey, Jim, I'm not sure why, but it kicked you out for some reason.
Yeah, I lost the signal for some reason.
Okay. I think in the time there, but basically what I'm saying is tackle the customer bit separate from the technical bit, because they're quite well compartmentalized and you can do both. If you've got shitty sort of technical kind of problems, lots of bugs and stuff, and you actually haven't got the credibility with your customer, maybe try and sort that out first. It will make the discussions with your customer much easier. But if you're in a reasonably good place, but you know that you still got problems because you need to look at getting your technical and your customer sorted out first. If you're in a situation where you want to make more money, look at the customer first. Go get them, do everything you can to get them focused on, look, how can we work together to prioritize our stuff? To make sure that you get the best value. We as a technical team will slow down and will help you do that, because at the moment we're busy being fast, working as hard as we can, and that's actually not helping you because we're fast and we're going in the wrong direction. So just to summarize, you've got the two things you can do. You can do them separately, which is absolutely brilliant, 2 circles, but sometimes it might make sense to do them both at the same time. Sometimes it might make sense to do one or the other. It just depends on the situation. And that, I'm sorry, I'm 5 minutes over on the time there, is the is basically everything I wanted to share with you. That's how to transition, but it's not just how to transition to a U-shaped team. It's really important that once you've got it there, you keep it there. And that's that. So yeah, I have about 10 or 12 minutes left before I start my next meeting. Do you guys have any questions? I'm sorry, there's a lot of words there. Go for it, Dwayne.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I mean, I think that was great, by the way. I really like the way you've outlined that. A couple of questions. One was just about, is it important to have agreement on that relative capacity? I just get the feeling some teams may go, like you mentioned, the testing team who maybe are going, you know what, we need to do all of this testing, therefore we don't have a lot of capacity. But then somebody else might step back and go, well, actually, you don't need to do all that testing. You have a lot of capacity. And so there might be different, they might see themselves as sort of lower down the scale. You might see them as higher up at the scale. So therefore they might be going like, why are you trying to slow us down? Or,
The whole thing with this is that you're dealing with people, and it is so there's a big company I'm working with. They've got 1,500 developers. They put a whole lot of TOC all through it, but it's TOC that's come from a factory background, and so that they're actually doing really, really well. But it's not got the heartbeat of working with people and the collaborative sort of style of it, and they've not got coaching and stuff. So the reason I'm mentioning that is you could put all this stuff in as if it's like resources are resources, not people.
Yeah.
When you're doing with this, it's what you're really trying to do more than anything else, especially with the FBI thing, right, is you are trying to effectively do the equivalent of a retrospective on an ad hoc basis on a really, really important problem that's far, far easier to solve once you get people realizing it's important. But it's often not been solved because people didn't do it. So the first thing that people actually need to get to do is to realize that they actually work as a whole. And so sitting down with the resource, like the resource diagram and the bubbles, and then maybe putting names on it, putting more bubbles and stuff, and drawing a few arrows and just getting them to draw this around. And then giving them the light bulb moment of, do you guys know what a bottleneck is? Did you guys know what a bottleneck is? Oh, yeah. Where's our bottleneck? Oh, I don't know. And then get them just talking. And then your job is to guide them around to figure out, without telling them the answer too quickly, what they need to do. And it's really all about just carefully helping them get their words out and work together and talk. So it's largely a facilitation thing combined with two ideas. One is that there's a bottleneck, and two is it should be development if you actually want to be a high functioning as opposed to a busy team.
Hi, hey, look, that's it. So that's the end of the beta program. I must thank Matt, Dwayne, Massimo, and Jim for their input, especially this live session here. It's been a really nice way to wrap up the session. I hope you're not sick of the sound of my voice. My voice, I must admit, after recording that, is feeling a little bit tired. But hey, look, if you've got any questions, if you've got any thoughts, anything like that, I'm very easy to track down on the internet. Find me on LinkedIn, or if you would rather email me, Clarke, CLARKE, at toc.guide, Clarke at toc.guide.